I'm so thankful to coach these women, and I'm just thankful for this experience with them. They're a great example to everybody, what it means to just put one foot in front of the other, to persevere. They have been an absolute joy to coach. It's an incredible group of women, an incredibly connected group.
The Indiana Fever didn't just lose a basketball game. They lived through what many fans now believe was one of the darkest nights in WNBA playoff history. Game 5 of the 2024 series against the Las Vegas Aces wasn't remembered for great plays, highlight reels, or clutch moments. It was remembered for something else entirely.
Two of our biggest stars go down, and we continue to fight and send it to overtime. Obviously, ending on a loss is hard, but I do think that we can be proud of the effort we put out there. And for us to be able to build that this season is something that's very special. Bond, this tightness, these friendships on every team in pro sports, that's not normal.
Whistles that only seemed to blow one way, a star player sent packing on calls that made no sense, and a level of controversy so obvious that fans who had no rooting interest were calling it a disgrace. If you thought playoff basketball was supposed to be the purest form of competition, this game showed you something much uglier. From the jump, something felt off in that series. Even before Game 5, Indiana fans were grumbling, pointing to numbers that didn't lie. Every time the Fever gained momentum, every time they looked ready to flip the series on its head, the whistles came, and somehow they always came against Indiana. It didn't feel random. It didn't feel like normal physical playoff basketball. It felt like there was an invisible hand tipping the scales. By the time Game 3 rolled around, Vegas had shot nearly twice as many free throws as Indiana, a gap that's almost unheard of in postseason play, where both sides usually fight tooth and nail for every point. Analysts tried to explain it away. Commentators danced around the subject, but fans watching knew something wasn't right. The biggest victim of all this chaos was Aaliyah Boston. She wasn't just the centerpiece of Indiana's defense, she was the anchor that kept them in every single game. And yet, night after night, she was the one being whistled for fouls that left fans scratching their heads. Moving screen, offensive shove, contact that barely existed on replay suddenly became a foul against Boston. Meanwhile, on the other end, A'ja Wilson could bulldoze defenders without so much as a raised eyebrow from the officials. It created a nightmare scenario where Indiana's best player had to tiptoe around the floor, terrified of being penalized for just existing in the paint. Game 5 took that pattern and cranked it into overdrive. The moment that still haunts Fever fans came in the final minute of regulation. With the game on the line, Boston and Jackie Young fought for a rebound. Nothing unusual, just the kind of physical scrap that happens on every possession in the postseason. And then, out of nowhere, the whistle blew. Sixth foul. Boston was done. The Fever challenged, knowing it was their last hope, and the replay told the truth. There was nothing there. Nothing that justified tossing out Indiana's most important player with less than 30 seconds left. Yet somehow, the refs doubled down and upheld the call. Jackie Young walked calmly to the line, sank both free throws, and gave Vegas the edge they needed. Imagine being in the Fever's shoes at that moment. Their leader gone, their interior defense ripped away, their morale hanging by a thread. For most teams, that would have been the end. But Indiana refused to fold. Odyssey Sims decided if the game was going to be stolen from them, she wasn't going down without a fight. Possession after possession, she drove, attacked, scored, and kept Indiana alive. 27 points on the night, almost all of them earned through sheer willpower and determination. And what did she get for it? Brutal contact on every drive, hammered at the rim but no whistle. Kelsey Mitchell's story was just as heartbreaking. She had put up 15 points, her body covered in bruises from constant hacks, until she simply couldn't go anymore. Cramps set in so badly she had to be carried off the court. Later it came out she ended up in the hospital. Think about that. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was the result of getting pounded possession after possession without protection from the officials. Her body gave out from the abuse, and the refs kept swallowing their whistles. And it wasn't just Boston, Sims, or Mitchell. Lexie Hull was shoved so hard by Jewel Lloyd that fans in the arena thought for sure it would be reviewed as a flagrant. Instead, the refs shrugged and called it a common foul. Natasha Howard got slapped across the face, and not only was there no flagrant, there wasn't even a review. Meanwhile, Vegas was parading to the free throw line. At one point, A'ja Wilson had 10 attempts from the stripe, while Boston, who had lived in the paint all game, had just 2. How does that math even begin to make sense? And yet, somehow, the Fever dragged this battle into overtime. Sims hit a clutch layup, the arena exploded, and for a moment, it felt like Indiana's heart might outlast the odds stacked against them. But overtime was just more of the same nightmare. Every 50-50 ball, Vegas's way. Every touch foul, against Indiana. Every drive by a Fever guard that ended with a body hitting the floor, silence from the officials. Even the commentators, usually careful not to criticize referees too harshly, were fumbling over their words. They couldn't explain what they were watching because it was impossible to justify. Still, Indiana fought. They clawed. They bled for every basket. And when the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard showed what many had already suspected: the Fever hadn't just lost to the Aces. They'd lost to the Stripes. The postgame was almost as telling as the game itself. Lexie Hull, emotional and drained, chose her words carefully. She said the team had been built for adversity, that they had faced this before, read between the lines. She wasn't just talking about tough opponents. She was talking about a system that seemed designed to hold them back. Coach Stephanie White echoed that sentiment. She praised her players for fighting through everything thrown at them. Again, not just the Aces, everything. Everyone watching knew exactly what she meant, even if she couldn't say it outright without getting fined. Fans didn't need any translation. Social media erupted with clips, slow-motion replays, and side-by-side breakdowns of calls that looked like pure fabrication. Hashtags questioning the integrity of the league trended. Neutral fans with no ties to Indiana were outraged, calling it one of the most poorly officiated playoff games in memory. Former players chimed in too, tweeting disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Yet, the league office? Silent. No acknowledgement, no explanation, nothing but a suspicious quiet that made it all look even worse. And this wasn't just about one night. It was a pattern that stretched across the series. From the first tip-off, Indiana had been fighting uphill, not just against a two-time defending champion, but against whistles that always seemed to echo in the same direction. Add in the context, Vegas being the league's big market draw, the team most expected to boost TV ratings, and suddenly, the puzzle pieces looked like they were forming an uncomfortable picture. Was this just incompetence? Or was it intent? Fast forward to 2025, and the Indiana Fever are no longer the underdogs struggling to be heard. They've got Caitlin Clark running the floor, Aaliyah Boston blossoming into one of the league's most dominant centers, and a roster that refuses to quit. They've transformed into a powerhouse. And yet, for every highlight Clark delivers, for every monster game Boston puts up, there's still a shadow lingering from that night in 2024. Because what happened wasn't just about one loss. It was about credibility. It was about whether fans could trust what they were watching. Some will say the adversity made them stronger, forged their identity, turned them into the gritty squad we see now. And maybe that's true. But it doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't erase the fact that a group of players gave their all, only to have the game ripped away by decisions no one could defend. The referees weren't just inconsistent. They weren't just bad. That night, they looked like they were following a script. And that should never happen in professional sports. Fans deserve better. Players deserve better. The game itself deserves better. When you tune into a playoff game, you expect to watch the best athletes compete at the highest level, not wonder if the outcome's already been decided before the ball is even tipped. That's what made Game 5 so devastating, not just for Indiana, but for the entire WNBA. It planted a seed of doubt. It made people ask the question no league wants to hear. Is this real competition, or is it theater dressed up as basketball? The Fever can keep winning. They can keep building. They can keep proving that heart and talent can overcome even the darkest obstacles. But until the league takes accountability, until there's transparency in officiating, until there's real assurance that this won't happen again, the stain of Game 5 will never fully fade. And maybe that's why fans keep bringing it up, even now. Because this wasn't just a loss. It was a robbery. It was a disgrace. And pretending it never happened doesn't erase the memory. It just guarantees it'll happen again. But here's the part that makes the story even harder to swallow: the way the league handled it afterward. Or rather, the way they didn't handle it. Think about it. In any other professional sport, if a playoff game ended in that level of controversy, there would at least be an acknowledgement, maybe a statement, maybe an explanation, maybe even a quiet admission that the officiating was subpar. But in this case, silence. No comment from the league office. No transparency. No accountability. It was as if the powers that be wanted the whole thing swept under the rug, buried before too many questions were asked. And for fans, that silence spoke louder than anything else. It wasn't just about a few bad calls. It was about trust being broken. Basketball fans are passionate, loyal, and smart. They know when something doesn't add up. They can see when momentum is killed by whistles that don't match the action on the court. And the longer the league stayed quiet, the more it looked like a cover-up instead of incompetence. Fans began asking the obvious. If this can happen on a stage as big as the playoffs, what's stopping it from happening again? What fueled that outrage even further were the side-by-side video edits that started flooding social media. Fans clipped Boston's so-called fouls next to Wilson's aggressive moves that drew nothing. They slowed down the footage, froze the frame, circled the lack of contact, and asked, "Where's the foul?" Over and over, fans pointed out the same thing. The inconsistency wasn't random. It seemed deliberate. One standard for Indiana, another for Vegas. And it wasn't just Indiana supporters saying this. Neutral fans chimed in too. People who had no emotional investment in the Fever suddenly found themselves rallying behind the idea that a team got robbed. Analysts started dedicating podcast episodes to the subject. Former players shook their heads on social media. It wasn't a local outrage anymore. It was a national conversation about the credibility of the league itself. Now let's not ignore the elephant in the room. The Aces were the defending champions. They were the star-studded, headline-grabbing team the league had been promoting for years. From a business standpoint, Vegas moving forward made sense for ratings, for ticket sales, for marketability. But sports aren't supposed to be scripted entertainment. They're supposed to be competition. And when fans start feeling like outcomes are nudged in one direction for the sake of a storyline, the entire foundation of the league cracks. That's what made Game 5 so dangerous. Not just for the Fever, but for the WNBA as a whole. But here's where the story takes a fascinating twist. Instead of letting that night break them, Indiana used it as fuel. They carried the memory of those whistles, of those phantom fouls into the offseason. Aaliyah Boston didn't fold under the weight of what happened. She came back hungrier. She came back determined to never let herself or her team be in that position again. And when Caitlin Clark joined the roster in 2025, it was like pouring gasoline on an already burning fire. Suddenly, Indiana wasn't just a scrappy underdog. They were a storm waiting to unleash. Think about what that means. The very thing that was supposed to crush them instead built their identity. Fans now look at Indiana as a team forged in controversy, hardened by unfairness, and determined to prove everyone wrong. Every time they step onto the court, there's an undercurrent of defiance, a reminder of what they endured in that playoff series. And fans eat it up. They don't just cheer for the Fever to win, they cheer for them to overcome, to expose, to rise above what many believe was outright manipulation. Still, that doesn't excuse the damage that was done. Because for all the talk about growth, for all the pride and resilience, there's still the cold reality. Indiana should have had a fair shot in 2024. That team earned the right to fight for a spot in the finals without interference. They deserved to see how far their heart and talent could carry them. And the fans deserved to know that what they were watching was pure competition, not something tainted. That opportunity was stolen, and stolen opportunities don't come back. The most telling part of all this is how players continue to talk about it, subtly, carefully, but undeniably. Listen to Lexie Hull's interviews months later. The way she always circles back to facing adversity or pushing through unfair situations. Listen to Stephanie White's words about everything thrown at us, and how she doubles down on how proud she is of her players for never backing down. Those aren't random cliches. Those are veiled references to a night everyone remembers but no one in the league office dares mention. And fans remember too. They chant about it in arenas. They drop comments under every Fever highlight reel. They bring it up every time officiating feels even slightly tilted in another game. That's the lasting impact of what happened, an entire fan base that will never forget, and a league that will never fully live it down. But here's the chilling question. If it happened once, what's stopping it from happening again? If a defending champion can get that level of favoritism, what happens when another ratings darling is on the brink? Will calls mysteriously swing their way too? Can fans ever really trust the product when the precedent has already been set? The WNBA is at a crossroads. The Fever's resurgence has reignited excitement in the league, but the shadow of 2024 lingers. If the league wants to grow, if it wants to keep fans invested, it has to prove that integrity comes first. That means accountability for referees. That means transparency when mistakes are made. That means showing the world that every team, whether a big market giant or a rebuilding underdog, has the same chance when the ball is tipped. Until then, the memory of Game 5 will live on as a cautionary tale. It will be the ghost hovering over every controversial whistle, the reference point for every fan who says, "Here we go again." And no matter how much the league wishes people would forget, the Fever and their supporters will never let it fade because they know what they saw. They know how it felt, and they'll keep reminding everyone that the scars of that night still matter. So the next time Indiana takes the floor, remember the weight they carry. Remember the whistles that silenced Boston. Remember the bruises left on Mitchell. Remember the grit of Sims. And remember that this team isn't just fighting for wins. They're fighting for respect, for fairness, and for the integrity of the game itself. Because Game 5 wasn't just one bad night. It was a turning point. A reminder that corruption, whether hidden or obvious, can never fully erase the spirit of a team determined to rise above it. And if the Fever have anything to say about it, that spirit will burn brighter than any whistle ever could.